Good evening. Good girl. Thanks for coming, Bill. I'm Larry Blunt, and I'd like to welcome you to the third and final of our three 2016 debates, co-sponsored by Western Carolina University and WLOS-TV. Tonight's debate features Jim Davis, Republican. He's seeking his fourth term in the Senate, and Jane Hibbs, Democrat, now retired, but formerly working in public education and private consulting. Both are vying to represent the 50th Senate District in the North Carolina General Assembly. Now, before we begin, I'd like to review the rules. Senator Davis, just a little while ago, won the coin toss, and he opted to go last. So we're going to begin asking Ms. Hibbs the first question. She will have 2 minutes to answer that question, and Mr. Davis will have 2 minutes to answer the very same question. And then at that point, Ms. Hibbs will have 1 minute for rebuttal, and then the same for Mr. Davis. 1 minute for rebuttal. As the moderator, I have the right to ask a short follow-up question to either candidate, and their responses to those follow-up questions will be limited to 30 seconds. We will repeat that process for each question, making sure that we alternate between the two. Each candidate will also have up to 2 minutes for a closing statement. When the light on the candidate's podium turns red, his time is up. And we ask both candidates to respect the time limits. We've seen on TV how that goes. Neither candidate has seen the questions that we're going to ask. We're anticipating a lively but controlled, informative debate, and to make sure that both candidates are heard, we're going to ask of you, our audience, to hold your comments, hold your applause until the very end. And then know this, if audience members interrupt the candidates, we're going to reset the time limit. So you can be here all night if you keep interrupting. So keep that in mind. I think the first thing that we're going to do right now, before we get underway, will you please rise and face the flag for our pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, on to the debate. You won the toss. You've opted to let Ms. Hibbs go first, so let's begin with this question. Ms. Hibbs, you've both been on the receiving end of some negative ads this election season. We'd like to give each of you the opportunity to respond to those ads. And are there any mischaracterizations or are there accusations that were levied against you that you just feel were false? Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
That's a wonderful question. And thank you so much. But I want to thank Western Carolina University for hosting this, and also WLOS. Thank you so much. These flyers have been interesting. I tell you, I didn't know, I'm not the person that I thought I was when I look at these flyers. One of the things it says I'm going to do is raise your taxes, and I've never said that. But I want to tell you something. Senator Davis has raised our taxes 50 ways to Sunday. He's raised them on our oil changes. He's raised them on our movie tickets. He's raised them on the purchase of computers. Everything is more expensive, and yet we still have minimum wage here. It's hard for families to get ahead, and that's one of the reasons that I'm running. He's also questioned my faith. And you know, I'm a saved Christian. And what he's saying is not true. Not true in any sense of the word. I've always been in church. And I believe in the Bible, and I believe in Christ. And this is very unfair of what he's saying. He's also saying that I'm not the one who's fit to be there. And he's wrong. Because I've been a servant all my life. I want to work for the people in this district. I want to help us. I want to help move us out of poverty. I want to improve education for people. I want to improve opportunities for people. I want to improve broadband for our people and entrepreneurship. I'm ready to be your state senator. These ads are so unfair. My face has been ripped and added to Hillary Clinton. I've never met Hillary Clinton. And there's a lot of stereotyping that's being done. I'm not like Hillary Clinton. Thank you.
All right. Senator Davis, same question for you. You've been on the receiving end as well, some negative ads. What would you like to correct that you think was false?
Well, probably the biggest one is I voted to cut education. I've never done that. As a matter of fact, I challenged my opponent in a previous forum to name one time. I was 10 years a county commissioner and 6 years a state senator, and I've never voted to cut education budget. I don't think increasing funding for education is the answer to all of its ills, but I've never voted for that. The only way that you could even say that there was a possibility is the last vote that I took for a budget in Macon County was I did not vote for the budget because it increased taxes 2 cents and ostensibly to pay for the school. And I made the motion to build the school. But we did not need the tax increase. We had sufficient fund balance to do that. So I have yet to hear from her. She's never stated when I voted to cut education, and the reason is that I've never done it. In addition to that, I've not raised your taxes. Your tax burden for every individual and every family in North Carolina is less than when we took office. We have broadened the base. We have been involved in tax reform, which is needed in this state to reflect the new economy. But people's overall tax burden is less, and I'm very proud of that. So those are the two big ones. Thank you.
Okay. 1 minute for rebuttal, Ms. Hicks.
Well, Senator Davis can say he's never cut education. But you ask a teacher, any teachers here tonight? Any of you folks earning $50,000 a year like he said you are? We're 41st in teacher pay. We're 47th in per pupil spending. Today I read something, we're 49th in principal pay. We're not doing very well on that. So education, public school education has been cut. He may have raised the budget, but that's for other things. That's for vouchers. That's for charter schools. That's for virtual schools. And it's also for a school district that's been established for low-performing schools. But public schools are suffering. That budget has gone down.
Mr. Davis, 1 minute rebuttal.
Thank you. Well, we have increased per pupil funding every year since we've been in control of the legislature, January 2011. Every year with the exception of one where it went down a few cents. It's difficult to know what the student population is when you're doing the funding. So I feel very comfortable with that. But the bottom line is the numbers don't lie. I've got a great, huge chart out there, and you can see the exact number, and that's from the Department of Public Instruction, North Carolina. Those are real numbers, and it shows that we've increased education funding every year. The decreases and the furloughing of teachers occurred before January 2011 when we were in charge.
Okay, you started going down the road of taxes a little while ago. Let's take that a little further. Much of the public debate in this race has involved taxes. Please explain to the voters where you stand on taxes in North Carolina, including whether sales tax or income tax provides more long-term benefits to our state.
Well, states that have no income tax are doing quite well. Texas and Florida are two great examples, and the poverty rate is about the same. I'm more in favor of a consumption tax because it's a more predictable source of income. In addition to that, it gets the underground economy. It gets visitors when they come to our area and spend money. And income tax just penalizes productivity. And our tax reform that we've done in the legislature has resulted in an increase. We started with a $2.5 billion budget deficit when we took over in January 2011. And our revenue has increased this year, especially. The first 3 months of this fiscal year, we just found this number out last week, our budget is our revenue is $158 million above our projections. What that means is that we're going to have more money to invest in the legitimate functions of government. The primary one being education is 56% of our budget. But I believe philosophically that we shouldn't spend money that we don't have. And what we are doing is reviving the North Carolina economy. We've added 41,000 jobs since January 2011. More people working, more people paying taxes, and more revenue to the state. So I'm very comfortable with what we've done. It's making a difference.
Okay. Ms. Hibb, same question.
Well, a consumption tax, it might catch a few of the tourists, but it catches the hard-working people every day that they live here. And these consumption taxes go on and on and on and on. There's consumption tax for small businesses, for license tags, for car registrations, boat registrations, for your farm equipment. How many people do you think are coming out of state expecting a tax break on farm equipment? That affects the people right here. And another thing, he's talking about jobs and more jobs. Actually, we have fewer jobs. We have a larger population, but we have fewer jobs. And they're paying less. And the median income of our people here in this region has gone down $3,000. So people are not as well off as they used to be. People are suffering. This man, he was bought. He was bought by large corporations. And he has sold our state. And our people, as a result of that, are struggling. Are any of you people in the top 1%? Raise your hand. Are any of you special interest groups? Raise your hand. Are any of you representing large corporations? Raise your hand. This is what Jim Davis has supported, and that's not us. We need to be supported, folks. We are the people of Western North Carolina. We need a representative taking care of our needs on a daily basis.
Rebuttal, 1 minute, Senator.
Sure. License fees, registration fees are not taxes, they're fees. And these, I will restate that. They're not taxes, they're fees. They provide a service to the North Carolinians. They haven't been raised since the early 90s. And I believe that when you get a service from the state, you ought to pay for that service. It shouldn't be supplemented from the General Revenue Fund. And that's what we've done. We've raised the fees to reflect the cost of those fees. That's what we've done, and I don't apologize for that. It's kind of truth in advertising, isn't it?
I see that as a tax shift. He's not calling it a tax, but it's shifted to a fee. It's the same thing, folks. We're paying more money. A guy told me he just got his registration for his bass boat. Last year was $15. This year is $45. That's a $200 increase. I just got the little sticker put on my license plate. $6 more this year than it's been before. But you continue to add these little fees, and it's picking our pockets, and it's making us poorer.
Ms. Hibbs, this next question, we'll start you with this. All sides agree that K through 12 public education is important. We should strive for continuous improvement. What do you see as the best way to do that, to improve K through 12 education system in our state? Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
Well, I think it needs to be well funded. And I think to have a good K-12 education system, you need to have a good preschool education system so our kids are prepared to enter school. And this administration has cut our pre-K slots. Our children are not coming to school as well prepared as they used to be. And another thing I can say about our education is, to get a good education, you've got to be well fed. And 1 in 4 of our children comes to school hungry. And in our preschool population, the hunger is greater than that. But I think you have good public school education by having well-qualified teachers. You don't keep lowering the salary of public school teachers, our veterans, and expect them to stay and have a good education. When we get a new teacher, they need support. And we need to support them. We need good professional development training. This administration has cut the professional development. I used to be involved in professional development, so I know how important that is. We need to work with kids who are struggling to make sure that we have a good graduation rate. We have improved our graduation rate. On the National Assessment of Educational Progress, we are in the top 10, usually in number 4 or number 6 in the nation. And we are part of an international study, North Carolina is, and when we're compared to other nations, North Carolina is above the United States, and we're in the top countries. We're considered to be in the top countries of this world. So we have a good education system. We've got to keep it there. We're struggling with funding. One of the things that's happened now is the budget is going to be cut 2% of the money for 16-17. Where is that money going to come from? If it comes out of Macon County, they're losing 10 teachers. We cannot continue to lose. Thank you.
Senator?
Well, research shows that the single best indicator of a good education is a high-quality teacher in the classroom. And we have devoted special funds to reward those teachers that are especially good at what they do. And so I agree with that. We have a lot of young people that are entering school that are not well prepared. And to say that the government is to blame for that or responsible for that, it's the parents are responsible for that. We need to do whatever we can to incentivize parents to ensure that when their kids begin, their students begin school, that they're prepared. We have young people coming in that don't even know their ABCs, can't count 1 to 10. That's unacceptable, but that's not North Carolina's fault. That's the parents' fault. So we need to incentivize parenting as best we can for them. The hunger, we have problems with hunger, I agree. But the numbers show that 40% of our kids in middle school, 40% of our students are obese or at risk. So and that's a national problem. It's not just North Carolina. So maybe they're not getting the proper nutrition, but some of them are overfed. And that's a problem. So it's up to the educational system and it's up to public health system to help teach people better dietary habits. We need to do that. But we've properly funded teachers, in my opinion. I don't know where we get the number that there are 2% reduction this year. It's simply not true. We've increased funding every year. And so you can go to the DPI website and look at the numbers. We don't just make those up.
Rebuttal, Ms. Hibbs?
Well, if we want to help families, we need to reinstate the earned income tax credit that helped hard-working families get ahead. Ronald Reagan put that in place, and he said that was the best thing that could be done to help impoverished families. Another thing that we need in our schools, we need textbooks. I was in Macon County in a high school. They were sharing textbooks. Desks were pushed together. Those textbooks were 17 years old. Our textbook fund has been cut over 38%. Supplies have been cut over 38%. How can our schools operate with a situation like this? And teachers are taking money out of their pockets to pay for supplies so their children can learn in their classrooms.
Senator?
Actually, textbook funding was cut, and it actually was cut more than 38%, but it wasn't cut by the Republicans. It was cut by the Democrats. About 2008, they cut it from $100 million per year to $2.5. We have restored that number. Now I think it's close to $70 million a year. Having said that, we also have to understand that education is changing. Textbooks are, old school, to use the pun, and we're going more and more to iPads and things like that. And so we have to fund those and to ensure the best that we can that students have access to those materials. We have some school systems in our state that don't use textbooks at all. But again, you're perpetuating the myth that we have cut textbook funding. It may have been cut, but it wasn't on our watch.
Okay, this next question, we'll start with you, Senator Davis. It's about Medicaid. Where do you stand on expansion of Medicaid? As you know, the state has voted to not expand it. There are many critics who say it's costing money and lives. What can you tell us about your stance?
Well, the reason when we took over in January 2011, the Medicaid budget was the single most unpredictable part of the state budget. And if you can't predict that, then you're in real problems, because Medicaid budget was consistently $400 and some million over budget. This year, I think it's within around 20 or 25 through the hard work of our appropriations chairs, and we've done some reforms, and so we're getting a handle on Medicaid spending. Why in the world would you expand Medicaid if you don't have control of the system? Why would you add on to a house if you have a lousy foundation? the same analogy applies with Medicaid. I don't know that it's that expanding Medicaid would save lives or not. You know, the research is not definitive on that. But I will tell you that by expanding Medicaid, the federal government says that they would pay up, you know, they'll pay 90% after 3 years. 90% of all the expenses in expanding Medicaid. Well, the problem with that is twofold. I don't know what 10% is for the state portion of that. Also, our federal government is running a budget deficit this year of about $600 billion. $600 billion. I tell people, especially young people, that I'm old. The damage the government can do to me is kind of limited at this point. But I care about them, and I don't want them to inherit a legacy of debt. And so I'm very reluctant to add on to the burden of North Carolina, presuming that they're going to pay up 90% of their share. If you believe that the federal government is going to live up to all their promises, you need to talk to some people from Swain County and the road to nowhere.
Ms. Hibbs, same question, 2 minutes. Expansion of Medicaid, where do you stand on that?
Well, Jim had the opportunity to expand Medicaid for 500,000 of our people. Let me tell you what that would have meant for Western North Carolina. And this is coming from the Cone Health Foundation report. The cost of not expanding Medicaid, number one, is overwhelming. But the funds right here would have created 319 jobs. We need jobs here. These would have been quality jobs. We are seeing a $155 million loss by not expanding Medicaid here. And we have over 6,000 people who could be receiving Medicaid that aren't. I was on the phone last night with a voter, and she told me she had missed receiving Medicaid by $3. And she said, if you get in there, please help me and help people like me. She said, my oxygen machine is not working properly, and I can't afford the medicine. If it weren't for the Good Samaritan Clinic in Haywood County, I don't know what I would do. And we have people like this who are having to decide whether they're going to buy the medicine or whether they're going to put food on the table. We need to help people. You know, to be successful, people have to be healthy. They have to be healthy and educated to be able to work. And health care is an essential part of our people. Let's get Medicaid. The Senate, the state didn't approve it this time because they want to figure out a way to privatize it and make more money for the private endeavors. You know, they're singing the song that Frank Sinatra sang, I Did It My Way. They want to do it their way. But they need to create a song that says, we missed the boat, folks. This was put in place in Arizona by a Republican governor, and it has cut down the hospitalizations by 47%.
Okay, Senator Hibbs, you have a rebuttal, 1 minute.
Yeah, some states that have expanded Medicaid are experiencing an overwhelming budget deficit. Virginia is one. They had a budget deficit of $2.1 billion. We had a budget surplus of over $400 million because of the responsible budgeting that we were doing. And so I'm very proud of that. But remember, nothing's a good deal if you can't afford it. Is the expansion of Medicaid in our future possible? Absolutely. But I'm a data-driven kind of person, and I want to see the numbers, and I want to have assurances from the federal government that their portion will be paid for. But that hasn't happened yet, and we've been working diligently. I will say we, our appropriations chairs and our Health and Human Services chairs in the Senate and the House have been working diligently to contain the cost, help get the fraud and abuse out of it, and so that we can predict what's going and drive people towards a medical home. That has proven to be the single greatest benefit to medicine and to people's health.
Ms. Hibbs, 1 minute rebuttal.
Okay. Well, you can talk about the $400 million surplus, but you know, that's here, that's there because they have picked our pockets and robbed us blind. They raised our taxes, they've raised fees. That money could have been used to have helped teachers and given raises to teachers, and it didn't happen. But let me tell you something else about Medicaid. They said, we're not going to take money from the federal government. We're not going to do that. We're not going to expand Medicaid. We don't want to accept that. But the next week, they took federal money to build a bridge in Charlotte. So where do they stand? They select where they're going to take federal money and where they're not.
Thank you. Next question, Ms. Hibbs.
Okay.
I've heard you both have been asked this maybe a few times, but for the benefit of our audience, you're both members of a party with an unpopular candidate for president at the top of the ticket. Should voters infer that you approve of the stances and behaviors of your party's candidate? Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
You know what I think is important in this election? I think it's important who you vote for state senate. We're going to have a much larger impact on your lives than whoever you get for president. Look at the issues, look at the candidates, and make your decision. But I'm going to help our people.
Senator Davis, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I have a hard time believing out of 330 million people that we have in America that these are the 2 best candidates to run for president. But this is what we're left with, and so we have to make a choice. Do you want, it all depends on your philosophy, who you're going to vote for. And I wish that a state senator had more influence on people than the president, but that's not true. I can attest to that. I wish it was that, because that meant there would be more local control, which I'm in favor of. I think local government is the best. So we have 2 imperfect choices, and I guess each of us has to choose which one we find less offensive.
Either one of you care to rebut, or are we moving on?
Well, I would say this. I would have trouble voting for someone who has sexually harassed women. I would have trouble voting for someone who has grabbed the private parts of women and bragged on that. I would have trouble voting for someone who talks about his daughter's behind. I would have trouble voting for a president who meets an 11-year-old girl and says he can't wait to date her when she's older. We need a more mature person than Trump. I'll say that.
Senator,
we have 2 imperfect people, and I think that we could do better, but we have not that many people that are willing to put themselves up for scrutiny, and go through what they're doing. So we just have to make our choices. But there are a lot of allegations about each candidate, and we just wait until the process goes through to see which ones are true and which ones aren't.
okay. Let's talk about redistricting. Gerrymandering has been a big issue in the state, gone to federal court. Several states have adopted nonpartisan redistricting commissions to lessen the influence of partisan gerrymandering. Where do you stand on this proposed reform? Would you support its adoption in North Carolina? Senator, 2 minutes.
I could support it like 10 years out, give us an opportunity to do that. Of course, the Democrats were gerrymandering for 140 years. It only seems right to let the Republicans do it for 140 years, and then we'll call it even. But that's not going to happen, and it's really not the right way. I would prefer, but there are as Obama once said, there are consequences to elections. And when the Republicans were put into control, they drew the boundaries, and they did them in a fair and legal manner. And not only did they do that, they had pre-clearance from the Obama Justice Department for the boundaries that they drew. But I've got no problem with personally with doing independent, having an independent. Those they have problems as well.
2 minutes, Ms. Hibbs.
I believe that districts should be selected with a nonpartisan group. What we have now, we have counties that are divided. In Haywood County, we have 2 representatives in the House, and that makes it difficult for us. When the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals looked at our congressional districts, they said that they had used a knife to select those districts based on racial populations. I think that it would be fair for our people if we had a nonpartisan committee selecting those. Richard Vinroot, a former mayor, Republican mayor of Charlotte, is in favor of redistricting in a nonpartisan way. That's what I'm in favor of too.
Rebuttal, Senator?
Is there such a thing as a nonpartisan?
You tell me, I'm asking the questions. I'm staying out.
I think that's a lofty goal, but I don't know that you can ever get there. But there's gerrymandering has been going on as long as our country has been in existence. And some people do it better or worse than others. But I would say again that there are benefits to the way that elections are the results of elections. And one of the benefits is you get to draw the lines. But once you draw them, you have to, Voting Rights Act and all kinds of federal agencies that have to sign off on it. And our redistricting, was done by Senator Bob Ruccio and Representative David Lewis, got pre-clearance from the Obama Justice Department.
Ms. Hibbs, rebuttal, 1 minute.
Well, it didn't hold up when it got with the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. They changed our districts, and they said it was unfair. And I want fair districts for all of us. I'm for the people. I'm not for the politicians.
Next question. This one comes from a Western Carolina University student. What is your stance on the Black Lives Matter movement? What actions, if any, should the state Senate take to address the concerns of this movement? Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
You know, I think this is very divisive when you ask this. Black Lives Matter actually started as a tweet, and it grew into a movement. But, you know, we all need to think of who we are. We're all a community. We're a community here of Appalachian white. We're a community here of African American. We're a community here of Cherokee, Hispanic, Latino. We're a community of Pacific Islanders. We need to work together to have a great community. You know, my late husband was the head law enforcement person in this district when he was district attorney. And he did his best to bring this community together. And we need to work to have a working community, to understand each other. We're all important. It's important to me that we protect our police officers. They go places where we wouldn't want to go. And we need to fund them adequately. I know Jim Davis has not given the money to the district attorney's office that they need to have the top-notch technological equipment. We need to keep our law enforcement system up to snuff so that we can be protected and feel safe.
Senator Davis, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think all lives matter, including Black lives. And I don't think anybody's life matters more than anybody else. So if we're going to talk about lives mattering, then I think we ought to extend that to everybody, including blacks and Hispanics and whites and everybody else. And I really have a problem. The problem that I have with the Black Lives Matter is if they really wanted to make a difference, they ought to go to Chicago. Whereas an epidemic problem with blacks killing blacks. If blacks' lives really matter, they ought to be in Chicago. That ought to be their best, their best audience to talk to people and try to get a handle on that. I think Chicago Black Lives Matter. But having said that, Blue Lives Matter as well. Everybody's life matter. And so I have a hard time putting one group over another.
Rebuttal, Ms. Hibbs.
No rebuttal.
No rebuttal. Okay. Climate change. Haven't heard much talk about that at the presidential debate level, which I try not to watch. What's your stance on climate change? What are its causes, and what actions, if any, should the General Assembly take to reduce its effects in western North Carolina? Senator, 2 minutes.
Well, anybody that studied geology know that we've had at least 2 ice ages, and so we know that the climate changes, and we understand that it changes every year. We've had some dry years and some wet years, some cold years, some hot years, and so it's gonna change. I guess the crux of the question is what are the anthropomorphic consequences that we're dealing with climate. My personal opinion is that we ought to do everything that we can to take care of our environment, to have efficient automobiles, to use electricity, solar, nuclear, all of it, and we ought to be very diligent about taking care of our nature. And but like I said, I think it's really presumptuous that much we can do as humans is going to have an effect on the climate. The sun has a little bit to do with that. Some people, the polar cap on Mars is getting smaller and there are no SUVs there. And so we have to understand that we have a responsibility to be efficient with what we do. We ought to take good care of our environment. We ought to, in my opinion, use all the energy sources that we have available to us. But I don't think we ought to do it with the presumption that we're going to change the climate and make it better. I think we ought to do it because it's the wise thing to do. It costs us less money. We don't use fossil fuels. It's less pollution. A lot of advantages to doing that. But to think that we're going to change the climate is really presumptuous, and I don't think the scientific evidence bears it. It's all built on a computer model, for Pete's sake.
Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
Well, there's a world concern about climate change. And folks meet from all over the world to talk about what they're going to do to improve our climate. And we do know that our ice caps are melting. And if you look at projected drawings, we're going to lose a lot of the United States. We'll lose Florida if we continue the way that we're going. We need to take care of our environment. We need to look at Western North Carolina and what are we doing? Well, we've had the threat of fracking. Jim Davis co-sponsored that bill. And then he came back and said, well, there's no deposits of natural gas here, but you know, there's some in the Piedmont and in the coastal area. And I think Jim Davis was the water boy for the folks who he sold out to because he carried their bucket. He told somebody that you don't always have to like a bill just to put it in place. And I don't agree with that. If I put a bill in place, it's going to be something that I strongly believe in. I'm not going to be a hypocrite in terms of what I support. So that's basically the way I feel about climate change. But let's look at the taxes that Jim Davis has put on us. Mobile homes. You know, you pay more tax for a mobile home than you do for a yacht. Have any of you people seen yachts in these areas? Now maybe if we have enough climate change, we'll have enough water here to have yachts. But we don't need that. Let's take care of our climate. Let's take care of each other. It keeps us healthier. We don't need poisoned water. We don't need polluted air. It's just going to make us sick.
Senator Davis, 1 minute rebuttal.
I really don't have anything to add to what I said. Thank you.
Okay. What is the greatest challenge facing the University of North Carolina system, and how should the state senate address it? Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
Well, the University of North Carolina has lost over $800 million. Western Carolina is part of that 17 university system. Our board has been changed. We lost Tom Ross suddenly, and yet people said he was doing a good job. We've lost professors because salaries aren't going up here. So professors are moving to other states. And also the cost of tuition has gone up for our community colleges, and that's actually not part of the university system, but it's gone up 81%. And tuition and fees have gone up at our universities. And yet families have less money. And one of the things that we've got to make sure is that we have an educated population. Now, Western Carolina University is supposed to go to a lower tuition rate, $500 a semester. Sounds great. It's funded right now. But you know, when a new group goes into the legislature, they don't have to honor those promises. So I'm worried about Western Carolina University. I'm a graduate of this university, and I care what happens because I live here and I want to support this university. If I'm in the North Carolina Senate, you better believe I'm going to take care of WCU. Go Cats.
Senator Davis, 2 minutes.
Yeah, again, funding is not the only answer to our educational problems, but I will say that we've increased education funding every year. With the exception of 1 year, the university system has realized increased funding. I'm very proud to have signed on and voted for in the Senate, and it was later turned into law, the North Carolina Connect Bond referendum that was approved by about 62% of our population. A majority of Democrats and Republicans favored that. The neat thing about that $2 billion bond is $980 million of it is is dedicated to the university system. $980 million, almost half of that bond. $110 million goes to this university to take, for a new science building. The single, best funded project in the whole university system. NC State is getting more money, but they have 2 projects. So I think that's fantastic that we've done that. The real big deal about that NC bond is that after taking over that $2 billion debt, our debt service actually goes down because of the payment of other obligations. So I'm really proud of that. But we have a lot of reforms going on. The $500 tuition, actually every legislature every legislature that takes office does not have to honor what the previous legislature did. And so this is not a new problem. I will tell you that Western, I think the total for when they talked about this whole program, it was about $70 million out of general revenue that was going to go to make up the tuition loss. Now, fees are set by the university, not by the legislature. But the tuition is going to be $500. Every young person in North Carolina is going to be within 150 miles of the university where they can, and their parents can be assured that during their college life, so long as they continue in 4 years, they know what the cost is, $500. And I think that's a bargain to invest in our young people that way.
All right, thank you, Senator. Ms. Hicks, with a 1-minute rebuttal?
Yes. The university system, as I said before, has lost $800 million. The General Assembly came back and said, we're giving you $40 million. And they considered that a success. To me, that's stealing. And students are telling me here that the majors that they were expecting to be here when they came are no longer here because of the cuts. We need to have a strong university system. We need to be able to keep our people here, our students here, if they want to be here. They don't need to go running to another university because it's been that major has been taken away from here.
Senator?
Yeah, Western Carolina University is experiencing a growth in enrollment because of the excellent program that they have here. And some classes have been cut. I think when Chancellor Belcher came, there were about 7 French classes that they were being offered. Well, they cut those down to 2 because there wasn't the sufficient student load to take all those classes. That's just one example. So I think education is not immune from being more efficient. And so I feel very comfortable that they've done that. But I don't know when you're talking about when the education university system was cut. My guess is that it was before January of 2011.
Okay. Senator Davis, this is for you. This also comes from a student, Western Carolina University. We are seeing that our youth are leaving the region after they complete their education. As a representative of the 50th, what ideas or incentives do you have to keep young people here in Western North Carolina?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we can do is our tax reform and regulatory reform. We have decreased the burden on business and entrepreneurs so that they can start a business here, they can grow a business here, or they can keep a business here. And that's especially important. I'm very proud to have gotten through the Senate that later became law, an opportunity for Evergreen Packaging, formerly Champion Paper, to get a $2 million grant per year for 6 years to comply with EPA regulations that they were spending over $50 million for. That helped preserve over 1,200 jobs in James home county. I'm very proud of that. Evergreen has about 1,400 jobs in North Carolina. 200 of them are in the Raleigh area. The rest are in Haywood County. Evergreen has about a $250 million economic impact in our state, in the region, I'm sorry, not in the state. I was also got through the legislature live dealers at Cherokee, which resulted in immediately an $80 million increase in their revenue. I'm not a big fan of the gaming industry, but it provides a lot of revenue in here. I just choose not to partake in it. But it's a legal operation, and it expanded, and it immediately increased their employees by over 1,000. Also in that legislation, they were allowed to put 2 more casinos in the region. And they decided to do one in Murphy, in Cherokee County. And they have over 1,000 new employees there in that. So you add 1,000 in Qualla Boundary and 1,000 in Cherokee, that's 2,000. And so I think that that's a pretty good track record for what we've done. But the main thing that we can do is to incentivize business to stay here and to grow here by lessening their tax burden so they have more money to invest in their business and their employees.
Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
Well, I think it's interesting. Every forum that I've been with Raleigh Jim, he talks about Evergreen. And let me tell you about that. What I understand is Zeb Smathers, who's an alderman for Canton, and Joe Sam Queen got together and they realized that they could get some money for Evergreen. Jim Davis was out west riding his motorcycle. He got a call and folks told him how Joe Sam walked him through the process. I'm glad Evergreen got those jobs. But I'm sort of tired of Raleigh Jim bragging about how he got those jobs for Evergreen. Now, I think one of the greatest exports we have in this region are our youth. I have 3 children. None of them are able to fulfill their qualifications working here, unfortunately. And what we need to do, we need to build infrastructure here. We need to have broadband and fiber to the forest reaches of this region. And when Jim was talking about having laptops or iPads for kids, they can't necessarily use them at home because they don't have the connections. I was in Cherokee County and this guy said, I've got a question for you. And I thought, oh no, what's this going to be? He said, why don't I have broadband here? You know what we can have? We need to have that infrastructure. We have great programs for entrepreneurship here at Western, at our community colleges. We have ways to help people get into business. But you know, we've got such a beautiful area here. We've got clean water right now. We've got clean air for the most part. We need to get people coming here as though this were Research Triangle Park. We could become the Silicon Valley of the United States. Again, we could have it here in North Carolina. Keep our youth here. Let's work toward that. I'd like to have my children back.
Senator.
No, I think the broadband issue is a very complicated one. The problem with broadband is it costs between $50,000 and $75,000 per mile to run the infrastructure. When you have 20 people per mile, that's not a very good business model. I would love to see the Western North Carolina Business Department show me how that's going to be economically viable for investors, and can imagine what your monthly bill is going to be to cover that expense. It's just not going to happen. It's the same reason why you don't have an interstate highway in Nantahala. The population density does not warrant it. I wish that it would. I'm hopeful that technology is going to be able to bypass, running cable, and we'll be able to do wirelessly and to serve these sparsely populated areas. I wish everybody had high-speed internet, but the government can't afford to do it, and private business is not going to do it because it's not economically viable yet, doing it the way we have. Hopefully, technology will be able to dig us out of it.
1 minute as well.
Okay. We didn't have electric lights here one time. And TVA, the federal government, came in and gave us electric lights. Private business is not going to bring in broadband and fiber, but I think we can get it through federal grants, through state help. It has to come in order for this region to grow. And Jim, you should have been working on that. You've been there 6 years. Where's our fiber, buddy?
Senator.
Well, if Jane can provide fiber at $50,000 to $75,000 per mile for these sparsely populated areas, I would like to know how to do it, because I'd certainly be glad to introduce a bill to do that. I'd like to address one thing that she said in her previous response about Joe Sam Queen walking me through how to get Evergreen. Joe Sam Queen has never walked me through anything. And I don't even know that if he was in the legislature. Yeah, he was. He was during that time. But that was my name is on the bill, and Joe Sam's is not. Now, he may have voted for it in the House. I hope he did. But that would be the only impact that he had on the thing. We worked really hard to do that. If you want to really know who did it, talk to the president, the CEO at Evergreen in Canton.
You're going to have the next question here.
Okay.
The governor's race in North Carolina is neck and neck, and there's a good chance if either of you win, you will be working with the governor of the opposing party. Please make the case to these voters that you are the better candidate to work across the aisle and create policies that are better for all North Carolinians. 2 minutes, Senator.
Well, I've served in the legislature with a Democrat governor and a Republican governor. I've served in the county commission. Well, that was a majority Democrat and majority Republican, and I haven't had any problem getting things done. I've only had one bill that I introduced in the legislature. It was drug testing for TANF benefits, the only federal program that you're allowed to drug test for, and my governor vetoed the bill. Fortunately, we overrode the veto. So I have a proven track record legislatively of getting along with my peers regardless of who they are in order to make positive contributions to the local government or to the state government.
Ms. Hibbs, 2 minutes.
Well, I think I have a proven record of getting along with people. I've worked as a rehabilitation counselor. I've been into homes where they were struggling. I've been in schools as a school psychologist. I've been a teacher, a consultant all over this country. No, I'll take that back, 38 states. And I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. And I think I know how to work with people. I know how to work across the aisle. But also, when I go to Raleigh, I'm going to be working for you. And I'm not going to give in to anything that is not in the best interest of these 7 western counties. But I can reach across the aisle, I can work with people, but I'm not going to be working to line people's pockets. I'm not going to be working to help the 1%. I'm not going to be helping special interests. I'm not going to be helping large corporations. You know what Jim Davis did? He gave Duke Energy $265 million. He gave them a $265 million tax cut. He took a campaign contribution from them. And then he said that the taxpayers have to clean up the coal ash mess. I'm not going to represent you like that. I'm going to be for you folks. I'm going to be for the people of Western North Carolina, not the special interests, not the large corporations, not the 1%.
Senator, rebuttal.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you brought up Duke Energy. Duke Energy supplies energy for about 1/3 of North Carolina households. They're a great corporate citizen. I'm very pleased that they are. The myth that they're going to force ratepayers to pay for the cleanup of coal ash is just exactly that. It's a myth. If you read the legislation, they are required to pay for it, and not the ratepayers. You know, the stockholders and the corporation itself is going to pay for cleaning up that. And they provide tens of thousands of jobs to North Carolina, and you bet I take campaign contributions from them, like I do a lot of other people. I don't endorse everything that they do, but I think they're an incredible corporate citizen. And you know, there are these coal ash things. We have put the strictest coal ash regulations in the country on Duke. We find them, and we put the strictest coal ash regulations. Every one of their coal ash pits were licensed by the Democrats prior to our getting here. It was state of the art at the time. It's not anymore. So to get on Duke Energy because of the catastrophic coal ash bill in Dam River is just really disingenuous, in my opinion.
I think Duke Energy just got their hands slapped in terms of taking care of their mess. There was a larger amount of money that was supposed to be levied against them, and it kept coming down and down and down. And people in this state are suffering who have to deal with the water that's coming downstream. They're drinking bottled water now. It reminds me of Flint, Michigan. We've got to take care of our waters. And we don't hold up a company that can't take care of our people. It's time that we need to find them more. And I wouldn't take a campaign contribution from them. I'll tell you that. I would consider it dirty money.
Okay. Ms. Hibbs, this is for you, 2 minutes. What is the most egregious example of government waste in North Carolina? And if you were elected, how would you address the problem? 2 minutes.
Well, you know, I hadn't really thought about that. But I'm going to be looking for waste. But I think the biggest waste is the money that we're giving to the 1%. The money that's going out to those large corporations. You know, some of these corporations have moved out of North Carolina. move to foreign countries, move to India, and they're bringing the people from their country back over here to North Carolina to be trained for those jobs. I think that's an egregious waste because our state is losing. We're losing jobs. We're losing money. And the hardworking people are in a situation where their hands are tied. But your hands aren't tied. You can vote, folks. You have till November the 8th to cast a vote to take care of your people.
Senator, same question. Government waste in North Carolina. What's the worst you've seen?
In the state, I would have to say that it's probably in IT. When we became part of the leadership in January 2011, we found out that a HHS IT budget was almost $1 billion over budget and 2.5 years behind schedule. One of the vendors that there were no performance parameters put in these contracts. One of the vendors we paid $30 million to go away. We have towers of information in the state that don't talk to one another because a lot of them use Fortran. And probably some of these university students don't even, maybe not know what Fortran is. That's what I learned in college 40 years ago. So it's really outdated. And so we don't know if somebody is in prison if they're still getting unemployment compensation, you know, or they just don't talk to one another. And so we have a lot of savings that could be realized by the state by modernizing our IT system. And it's going to cost a significant amount of money. But in my opinion, it would be a wise investment. But based on what I've seen, that's the biggest waste in state government. Problem was that we had a lot of legislators that didn't know diddly squat about IT contracts, and I would be one of those. And so you'd want to get somebody that knows what they're doing to draw those up. They were responsible for drawing up the contracts, and they didn't have performance parameters on getting a product done on budget and on time. And it just wasn't happening in the state. So I'd have to say that's cost our state billions, actually.
You have a rebuttal?
No, I didn't.
Okay. What area, and this will be our final question, and I believe at the end, we'll open it up to.
I can do one final and then have them do closing.
Then have them do the question, okay, all right. Ms. Hibbs, what area of government should we be investing more money in? And if elected, how would you advocate for increasing funding to this neglected area of our state?
I would increase money for public school education because I think most of our students are going to be in public schools, and an educated population, that's going to be the backbone of this state. And public school education has been cut to the bone. Teachers have not received the respect that they deserve. They've not received the wages that they deserve. Their salaries now have not even kept up with inflation. The first 3 years of teaching, they are making more money. But beyond that, they're not. And that's where I would place my money. More supplies, more technology, keeping teachers rather than letting our best teachers go out of state. I would invest in our young people. I would invest in our public schools.
Senator,
Would you repeat the question, please?
so, what area of government should we be investing more money? And if elected, how would you advocate for increasing funding to this neglected area of the state?
Well, I wouldn't, I disagree with your premise that we've neglected it. Like I said, education is 56% of our budget. Are we investing enough? And I like the word investing. We need to make sure that we're not just spending money, that we're investing it. And we're putting it in programs that actually work and pay dividends. Are good teachers paid enough in North Carolina? Absolutely not. Good teachers aren't paid enough anywhere, I don't think. They go into that profession knowing that they're going to have to get their reward somewhere else because we don't pay them like other countries do. I don't know that we ever would, but I will say that we've increased teacher salary. We've given them some of the largest pay raises in the state history since we've been in charge. Some people have problems, needs cough drops or something over there. And so those are the facts. We've done that. But I think, like I said, the single greatest factor for improving education is having a quality teacher in every classroom, and I think that's really important. None of us would be where we are without good teachers along the way. I've certainly had more than my share, and I appreciate them. But I think I would agree that education is probably the single greatest area to pay dividends, but to make sure that we're investing the money in education, not just spending it. Having said that about teachers, I have a little bit of time left. I will say that most people don't understand that the benefits that we give state employees, including teachers, is about $17,500 a year. And that's a significant. So that brings them over $60,000 per year for the average teacher. And that's better than the average salary that North Carolinians get. I think that's a great thing. We have a solvent, current employee healthcare system that is properly funded because of some changes that we made in 2011. We have a pension plan for state employees that's one of the best in the country, but it's still underfunded. Our real problem is retiree health care, where we're significantly under budget.
Okay. Ms. Hibbs, do you have a rebuttal?
No rebuttal.
Sure.
We're now going to go to closing statements, and since you began,
Should we go to Senator one, so we start with Ms. Hibbs, and then Senator Davis.
Ms. Hibbs, let's go with you on closing statements.
Okay. Well, you know, as I've said before, I'm a saved Christian. And I was raised on casserole dinners and spring revivals. And the preacher would say, you know, one of these days you're going to meet your Maker and you're going to have to answer some questions. And the questions are, did you feed the hungry? Or did you take away their food stamps? Did you give drink to the thirsty? Or did you offer them fracked water? Did you clothe the naked? Or did you tax them to the point they couldn't afford a coat? Did you help the sick? Or did you fail to give them quality health care? These are the questions that we need to answer, and this comes from the book of Matthew. And another Bible verse is the 9th commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Now, I don't know if Senator Davis reads his Bible, but I'm not sure he's following it, because he's certainly bearing false witness against me with these flyers and with these TV ads. But you know, I've got independents and Republicans, and Democrats, and unaffiliated supporting me. We don't agree on everything, but the thing that we do agree on is the rich are getting richer and the middle class is getting slammed. And that's why I'm running. This is important to me, and it's important to the constituents here. Thank you.
Senator, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank you for being here, for hosting this, WCU, and for your moderating, and for people to come. And I want to thank Jane Hibbs. People don't realize that it takes a lot of work, and it's not easy being a candidate for public service, and so you're to be commended for that. I appreciate it. I'd like to say that this is a primary example, it's a classic example of a contrast between somebody that's full of rhetoric and somebody that's full of results, or somebody that has promises and somebody that has performance. I can look to the performance that I've had in my career as a county commissioner in Macon County. I would like to let you know that I was the driving force in Macon County to build schools over there. We built over $100 million worth of schools. We had started off with 35 mobile units, and we ended up with nothing, with none of them. No mobile units in our school system. I think that's an incredible result, and I did that with the help of like-minded commissioners and Board of Education. So I'm very proud of being a part of that progress in my home county. That's the hallmark of my public service over there, actually. I'd like to talk to you about education spending. Oh, and by the way, we did that having the lowest, or one of the lowest tax rates in the state. Always in the top 5, lowest tax rates in the state. So we were able to take care of our capital facilities needs and still do that. What about education spending in North Carolina? We've increased education spending every year. We try to do it in a responsible way so that we don't just spend money, that we invest it in what it does best. And what does this mean for you with all these jobs and the tax policy and all this stuff? It means for you, our students here, that you're going to inherit a better North Carolina. A North Carolina that lives within its means. You're going to inherit a North Carolina that has better opportunities for you, for jobs, to provide for your family in the future. And my name is Jim Davis. I appreciate your vote on November the 8th or before if you're in early voting. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our debate.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.